Attacks. Vice President Bush, visiting Oman, called Gaddafi a mad dog. And a White House official who declined to be identified labeled Gaddafi's talk bluster. He actually sounds worried, said the official, and well, he might be.
From ABC, this is World News Tonight with Peter Jennings.
Good evening. What is the Reagan administration going to do about Libya, or has it already done something? It appears tonight there's been a major change. On Friday, ABC News was told by very senior administration sources that there would not be an attack on Libya in the immediate future. Now we are told an attack is imminent. We now believe that we have ABC's Liz Colton on at least a telephone line from her hotel in Tripoli. Liz, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
What have you seen and heard?
We've had planes overhead, anti-aircraft going off, flares in the sky, explosions, bombs that have shaken the whole hotel.
Liz Colton, ABC News in Tripoli, telling us that at this moment there is some bombing being done, which she says, as you hear out of her mouth, shaking the hotel and certainly in the general area of Tripoli. Good evening. There has been, as you know, an American attack on Libya. The attack is described to us as huge. Many targets in various parts of the country, which is about twice the size of Texas. BBC Radio in Britain, monitoring Radio Libya, says one of the targets hit was Colonel Gaddafi's home and that some of his family members may have been injured. There were many American aircraft involved, and the president is going to explain.
My fellow Americans, at 7 o'clock this evening, Eastern Time, air and naval forces of the United States launched a series of strikes against the headquarters, terrorist facilities, and military assets that support Muammar Gaddafi's subversive activities. The attacks were concentrated and carefully targeted to minimize casualties among the Libyan people, with whom we have no quarrel. From initial reports, our forces have succeeded in their mission. Several weeks ago in New Orleans, I warned Colonel Gaddafi we would hold his regime accountable for any new terrorist attacks launched against American citizens. More recently, I made it clear we would respond as soon as we determined conclusively who was responsible for such attacks. On April 5th, in West Berlin, a terrorist bomb exploded in a nightclub frequented by American servicemen. Sergeant Kenneth Ford and a young Turkish woman were killed, and 230 others were wounded, among them some 50 American military personnel. This monstrous brutality is but the latest act in Colonel Gaddafi's reign of terror. The evidence is now conclusive that the terrorist bombing of La Belle discotheque was planned and executed under the direct orders of the Libyan regime. On March 25th, more than a week before the attack, orders were sent from Tripoli to the Libyan People's Bureau in East Berlin to conduct a terrorist attack against Americans to cause maximum and indiscriminate casualties. Libya's agents then planted the bomb. On April 4th, the People's Bureau alerted Tripoli that the attack would be carried out the following morning. The next day, they reported back to Tripoli on the great success of their mission. Our evidence is direct, it is precise, it is irrefutable. We have solid evidence about other attacks Gaddafi has planned against the United States installations and diplomats and even American tourists. Thanks to close cooperation with our friends, some of these have been prevented. With the help of French authorities, we recently aborted one such attack, a planned massacre using grenades and small arms of civilians waiting in line for visas at an American embassy. Colonel Gaddafi is not only an enemy of the United States. His record of subversion and aggression against the neighboring states in Africa is well documented and well known. He has ordered the murder of fellow Libyans in countless countries. He has sanctioned acts of terror in Africa, Europe, and the Middle East, as well as the Western Hemisphere. Today, we have done what we had to do. If necessary, we shall do it again.
The attack on Libya almost 24 hours ago has left many Libyans dead or injured. 2 American Air Force officers and their aircraft still missing. They are the pilot of an F-111, Captain Fernando Ribas Dominici from Puerto Rico, and his weapons officer, the man in the back seat, Captain Paul Lorentz from San Francisco. And today, in a challenge which proved ineffective, the Libyans attempted to hit back. a Libyan motor patrol boat fired 2 missiles at an American Coast Guard installation here on the Italian island of Lampedusa, about 175 miles north of the Libyan coast. There was no damage and no American casualties. Tonight, the Libyans thought they were under attack again. It wasn't us, said the Reagan administration. But there was a lot of Libyan shooting into the dark night sky. Here's ABC's Charles Glass in Tripoli.
A second night of firing into the sky above Tripoli. If there were planes overhead, the Libyan anti-aircraft batteries clearly didn't bring them down. If there were not, it may be just a case of nerves among an increasingly worried Libyan population. Most of the Libyans were terrified during last night's heavy bombing raid. Last night's 2 a.m. air raid took the sleepy capital completely by surprise. Colonel Gaddafi himself was reportedly unharmed, and to prove the point, Libyan television showed footage of the leader apparently meeting with officials today. Among last night's casualties, 3 of the children of Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi. Pediatricians said his 15-month-old adopted daughter Hannah died from the concussion of the bomb which hit Gaddafi's headquarters. Severely wounded were his 2 sons, 3-year-old Khamis and 4-year-old Saif al-Arab. Last night's raid took a heavy toll here. Libyan officials admit the hits on Gaddafi's headquarters and some military installations. But the Ministry of Information took us this morning to see for ourselves what damage had been done to one residential neighborhood. One of the damaged houses was the official residence of the ambassador of Japan. He said the U.S. may have been trying to hit an intelligence bureau in the neighborhood. If the American warplanes were aiming to hit the Central Security Force headquarters nearby, they missed badly. Instead, they killed innocent civilians and destroyed civilian homes. The French embassy was clearly hit in the raid, but worst hit of all were the homes of ordinary Libyans. One bomb, which left a 30-foot crater in the middle of the street, destroyed houses on both sides. Families were rendered homeless. Journalists have so far seen 14 dead civilians, with many more wounded. The actual figures may never be known. In the hospital, children cried out in pain. Doctors worked hard to treat the wounded. Libyan survivors of the attack were shocked and angry, with their anger directed firmly at the United States. Libya, meanwhile, called on the U.S. through the Belgian ambassador, who represents Libyan interests here, to agree to an immediate ceasefire. Charles Glass, ABC News, in Tripoli, Libya.
When American fighter bombers were lining up on their Libyan targets, the cameras were rolling. Here's ABC's Steve Shepard.
This radar image of the Libyan coast is from the target display screen of an F-111. It is exactly what an Air Force weapons officer saw as his plane approached Tripoli just before 2 Tuesday morning. Crossing the coast, the officer switched to this infrared picture, which clearly shows the Azizia barracks, Muammar Gaddafi's headquarters, and the intended target. The white stripe